Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just seen The Farewell, which I mentioned on a podcast the other day. The one about Nejada, the Chinese film. This is another Chinese film, Chinese-American.
Right.
I was really, really looking forward to this from the trailer, which we saw recently. I must say, I didn't feel let down. I really loved it.
I loved it. I not only loved it, I felt it spoke to me. Right? So it's really charming. It's really funny. And I think anyone who's either of an ethnic background or who's from an immigrant family or who's living between two cultures will find that it really resonates with them.
Yes. So it's written and directed by Lulu Wang. I haven't seen... I think she's made one previous feature. I haven't seen it. So I don't know her previous work. It stars Awkwafina, who was in Ocean's 8 and Crazy Rich Asians, which we both quite liked.
Yes.
She plays this character, Billy, who is American raised, moved over when she was a kid.
Yeah.
Hasn't been back home in a long time. She gets this news from her family that her grandmother, played by Zhao Shuzhen, forgive the pronunciation.
She's wonderful.
Who's absolutely fantastic. She has lung cancer. But her family, her sister looks after her, and her family aren't telling her. So everyone knows this. And so there is this... That is the kind of central tension to the film. But actually, I was surprised at what an easy watch it was. I think from the trailer, I was expecting it to be more challenging and more heavy.
Yes, it's laugh out loud funny throughout in what you expect to be, something that's emotionally wrenching. And actually all the emotions that you feel are kind of gentle ones, like, love, acceptance, forgiveness. And
actually for quite a lot of the film, so what happens is everyone kind of congregates in China. The place is Changchun, which is in northeast China. It has, I think the province has borders with Russia and North Korea, so it's up that area of China. Everyone congregates there for ostensibly the wedding. Well, it is the wedding of her cousin, Awkwafina's cousin. So there's a big extended family comes in. You've got uncles, aunts, cousins. Everybody's there. But of course, everyone knows that grandma has cancer, and no one is telling her. And I think, despite the fact that it is about this questions of death and loss and lying, to kind of, and whether it's to protect someone, that sort of thing. So much of the film, actually, I just really loved being part of this family's world.
Yes.
Like, it didn't need the sort of cancer story in a way. I love just being in their home.
Yes, but it very much needed that thing. Because actually, I think, the film is about family. It's about cross-cultural differences. Right, so there's a lot of argument. Oh, is China better? Oh, but you're Chinese. Well, I know, my passport is American. Is New York better than China? Right, like there are all those things, right? Which really kind of resonated with me. And so actually, you need a narrative excuse to bring all these people together. You need also the cultural convention that's at the center of the narrative, that it is customary and expected in China to not tell the truth on these occasions, whereas actually it's kind of illegal in America. So actually, this sets up kind of a central, I wouldn't say conflict, but, a central rubric or trope through which to investigate a lot of cross-cultural issues.
I agree. I'm not saying that it wasn't necessary for the film, but it surprised me that for so much of the film it fell into the background so much.
Yes.
And that in those scenes where everyone's kind of having dinner, teasing each other, talking to each other, grandma is constantly sort of lightly insulting various members of the family, saying "you look sad" and all that sort of thing, like the way grandmas are. Yes. The cancer story sort of does fall away very much so in those scenes, and I just had a really good time being in this family's world. And part of it, from the perspective of a white British person, is being invited into a world and a set of experiences that I don't share. Some of them are, some are kind of universal,
yes,
families and things. But part of it is very specific to China.
Well, actually, I mean, one of the wonderful things about this film for me is that it in fact did remind me so much of my family. I think my family, and especially my extended family, is just like that, right? But of course, you know, when looking at films that represent another culture, you're always measuring both what it is like, how it is the same, you know, and how it is different. And my take on it was that actually almost all of it was the same, except they were in a different country. You know, they had different rituals about funerals and about weddings. Yeah, but not that different, right? But the family dynamics in many ways were kind of very legible to me, very understandable. They were like my own families.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the biggest cultural differences that occurred to me is the scene where they go and visit their granddad's grave.
Yes.
And they bring sort of gifts and presents, and this thing about how they have to open bags of chips and cookies and things to leave them on the grave, because otherwise he won't be able to eat them if they're not open. And the thing about lighting a cigarette for him.
Yes.
And Grandma says, he doesn't smoke. He gave up smoking just before he died. And then the son says, no, he kept on smoking. He just told you that he didn't. And so they light the cigarette for him. And it was really funny and really sweet. A beautiful scene, actually. I mean, and it carries with it that theme in the smoking thing of lies of omission for the good of people. That's something that kind of, I mean, that's obviously a very strong through line through the film.
Well, I mean, the film is, so a couple of things. I mean, first of all, the film in many ways is not too highly skilled, right? So kind of, you know, if you're looking about aspects of mise en scène, you can tell it's not a very experienced person, you know, and kind of relatively little is done visually or kind of through camera movement or whatever. But on the other hand, it's a really accomplished film in terms of tone and also in terms of bringing out different dimensions of a story, right? So the central thing, in a way, is like this Chinese-American kind of thing where, you know, one of the uncles says, well, the difference between China and America is that in America, kind of everything is individual, and in China, you know, you are part of a family, you know, and part of society. And you have an obligation to them, and in relation kind of to whether you tell your grandmother or not, you know, that she's dying. You know, in America, you tell her and then you absolve yourself of the guilt and the burden, whereas here you share the burden collectively as long as possible, and that's the difference between America and China.
Yeah, the East and the West is how.
The East and the West, yeah. Am I
widely as he
paraphrasing
puts
that
it
correctly? Yes.
Yeah, East and West, and yeah, because Awkwafina's character Billy is very much questioning, why are we hiding this from her? She should know.
Yes.
And the rest of the family, certainly that uncle, very much believes that it is their burden to carry for her. Yes. And there's also this thing very early on about someone saying that there's a phrase in China, there's a saying in China, when you have cancer, you die. Which is quite a funny line. But there is this thing about how Grandma's husband, they didn't tell him, and she didn't tell him that he had cancer until just before he died. So they're doing the same thing.
It was quite customary in Spain as well.
Yeah.
You don't tell people because what good does it do them? So you try to make, you know, their last the little time that they have left in this world as enjoyable and carefree as possible. That's the idea behind it.
Well, that's certainly one way of looking at it. I think the film does question that. So in that scene that you brought up where the uncle explains to Billy sort of his perspective on why they are keeping this from the grandma, he talked about guilt, as you said. He talked about, you want to tell her because then you won't feel guilty for hiding it from her. Something along those lines. You want to just assuage your own guilt. But I kind of felt like I kind of didn't entirely believe him. I sort of felt like he and his perspective is about not wanting to face something difficult.
I didn't feel that at all. I felt that they genuinely believed that. And also, I think the only question was, are her affairs in order? And the answer is yes, right? We're told that her affairs are in order, right? And, you know, and the whole family is part of it. So the aunt is saying, I will tell her when it's time to tell her, right? And I think there's this very kind of gentle thing about, one of the things that I questioned is, does the grandmother herself know? I mean, is she keeping face for not to worry her children and grandchildren, right? That she's going to be okay. So I think that there is, part of what I love about this film is that, it's so kind, it's so well meant, and it doesn't disguise that there are problems, right? There are little subtle touches in the film that really reverberate with worlds, right? So Billy goes to China, expects to stay in her grandmother's house, but is told, no, we're at a hotel, right? Because we don't want to bother her, basically. And then the hotel that they're staying in, the lift isn't working, and anyway. But she runs across, it's obviously a hotel that's used for businessmen to bring prostitutes to, right? And there's this moment where she just looks across the hall, and you see kind of like this raggedy woman with like too bright lipstick and too few clothes, and kind of looking a bit, like she stayed up all night or something. And there's this look between the women, that I think is really kind of quite interesting. So, on the one hand, you're told, oh, China's fantastic, you can be a millionaire overnight, and right, but then you see all of these things kind of, on the margins of that, and that's just, one moment of that. The other moment that really struck me as just reverberating with the world is the moment at the wedding where the grandmother meets her old comrades, and you realize she'd been in the army, she'd been, I don't know, in Mao's Cultural Revolution or whatever, and she'd gotten shot, right? And then all of a sudden again, this puts it in the context of a China in the process of incredibly rapid change. You connect her having been in the army and these men having been in love with her, and so on. Also with, her house that has disappeared, and, the whole area has been rebuilt, and all you see are like skyscrapers and, kind of, with apartments.
Cranes, skyscrapers still being put up. You see kind of continued regeneration. And
so this very gentle story, which is really at the heart about the relationship between a grandmother and her granddaughter. The grandmother living in China, the daughter in New York. So, it's about this relationship, but cross-culturally, nonetheless takes place in this very, very rich world. And within an analysis of that world, the film is saying something, right, about that. So I loved it.
The relationship between the grandma and Billy is through her son, or son/dad. That's the side, it's the dad's side, I think, that grandma is on. And I think I might have liked a little more focus on him, because he's going to lose his mum as far as he knows, which is, very difficult. But there's also a sense in which he too is kind of caught between cultures. He has an American accent. So, we don't know his past exactly, but he has an American accent and he speaks English with his daughter. And I think I would have liked to have sort of got a better sense of his past and how he grew up and what he kind of remembers of what he knows of China and America and what the different experiences that he's had are.
I don't know. I didn't see that as a problem. Frankly, I just thought it was the actor that was cast, who clearly is Chinese American. He was the only face I recognized, in fact. I should have recognized Awkwafina, but I didn't. So
who plays him? Zima. That's Billy's dad.
Okay. I don't know. I think I've seen him on television a lot.
Okay.
So just to finish this thought, one of the things that I liked was this cross-cultural thing. So which means, that this family and this type of family is like China in the process of change. So Billy, she speaks with an American accent. She's already got different values, and a different career path, and so on, right? And she's already losing aspects of the language. There's a lot of words in Chinese that she no longer knows how to say. And then her cousin, so the other child in the family, his parents work in Japan. And so she's now marrying a Japanese girl, right? And so this marriage that they've all returned home for is with a girl who can't speak the language at all. The cousin who can barely speak the language, he has real difficulty in expressing himself in Chinese, right? And then the granddaughter who is more fluent, but nonetheless also has words that she's got to ask her father how to say.
Yeah.
Right. So you have like this family that across the generations is in the process of change, and even the other cousin who's quite young, Bao, who's remained in China. The parents' hope is that he will be educated in America, even though China is such a fantastic place where everybody can become a millionaire overnight.
Yeah. Which is a great scene, that kind of debate scene over dinner about which one's better. You can make all the money here, so why are you sending him to America to get educated?
That's right, and you can't criticize China, you're Chinese, right? Yeah. So it's a fantastic scene, but I don't think I'm quite adequately describing the tone of it, which is like so heartwarming and funny. Yeah, it's just like you just feel so much love in this movie. It's like, particularly in those moments where the granddaughter and the grandmother interact, right? The exercise scene is fantastic, right? Where, so it's just full of kind of tender, loving moments that I think, people who have grown up, certainly in extended families, will just recognize and kind of find very endearing. And it's hugely enjoyable. Actually, it's much, much more enjoyable than a lot of films that are, technically better. So,
yeah, it's a film that is kind of full of love and very generous to everyone in it.
Yes,
and everyone sort of, even the people who are more used as figures to be slightly mocked, like the cousin who's getting married and his wife to be.
Yes,
they still sort of. I felt quite bad for her, to be honest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's clearly very out of place.
The grandmother's so funny. I don't like her.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me was the song right at the end, which I really liked, and I sat all the way through, which is a version of Without You by Nilsson, but sung in Chinese.
No, it begins in Italian.
Was it?
Yes, it begins in Italian.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, and then it becomes a karaoke.
That's right. Yeah, not Chinese. It's because I looked it up as well, so I should have. It's by Fredo Viola, and it's called Senza di Te.
Yeah.
So yeah, I should have. But it was lovely, and it ends up, and I think it speaks to the kind of core idea of the film. For one thing, it's I can't live if living is without you, and it's about love for someone. But also, at the end of the song, lots and lots of voices come in. They all sing together, and actually the music drops out.
Yes.
And it's all about people together sharing.
Yes.
The love for grandma.
Yes. And it's done through a kind of a karaoke aesthetic.
Yeah.
So, which kind of is also very evocative because there's been so much of that in the wedding.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and very tender, the bit where the father and the daughter sing together, and it's really lovely.
And you do find out, this is not really a spoiler, but you do find out once the film is finished, you see home video footage of the real grandma.
Yes.
So which I didn't. I mean, it says at the start based on an actual lie.
Yeah.
In a kind of joke on based on a true story sort of thing. But I think the suggestion is that this is actually Lily Wang's family, which I didn't have any clue about. And it says grandma's still with us after 6 years after her diagnosis, which also I think probably suggests that grandma must know about it by now.
Yeah.
And that was very sweet and kind of very loving and generous and all the rest and everything that we've said. And then right at the end it says, the standard disclaimer of any relationship, any resemblance to people living or dead is
accidental.
Yeah, it makes a mockery of that, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah, it's very fun. It's very good.
But it's lovely.
It's a very funny film as well. And there's a lot of kind of visual jokes, so the film is clever that way, I think. And also, a lot of effects, a lot of laughs are achieved by holding a shot too long. Yeah, so the editing, there's humor kind of brought out through the editing as well. So, there are very clever bits.
Yeah. It's lovely. And they tell a joke in it, which it was my grandma's favourite joke. It's right at the start, and it's a joke which speaks again to the kind of theme of keeping secrets or kind of little white lies and that sort of thing. It's a joke about how I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's like someone's looking after a cat and the cat dies, and they ring up the person who owns it and say the cat's dead. And they say, well, couldn't you have let me down a bit more gently? Couldn't you have said the cat's on the roof or something? And so then, a little bit later, the husband dies. And they say, yeah, your husband's on the roof. And that was my grandma's favourite joke, which I didn't know until she died a few months ago. And then my uncle told it at her funeral. And there's also something about how, I think my gran she was like on holiday in Florida in the 80s maybe, and someone died, and someone rang her up and said, yeah, he's on the roof. And that's how they told, and she loved it. You know? So weirdly, that sort of spoke to me in a quite personal way. Right. I recognised that right at the start. But again, that kind of that speaks to this central question, which the film never resolves, of is it right to withhold this information from her? I think the film doesn't offer an opinion on that. It offers sides, and you can see everyone's point of view. And I suppose it does leave you asking the questions, but it doesn't kind of force them upon you. Like, I didn't come out the film thinking, oh, exactly what would I do, but it does kind of stay with you. I totally see, despite the fact that she is basically on her own in thinking this way, I totally see Billy's point of view.
Well, I mean, that's a different story. I would like to know. But I'm also... you have to be a bit humble, I think, because, I come from a cross-cultural family. And the way that you do things and the way that you're used to doing things is not necessarily the way that things are done or accepted to be done, in Spain or indeed in England. So, you might have this thinking that actually is the result of the context in which you were brought up. Sometimes, ethical things are really just kind of, social customs, right? Appropriate ways of doing things in a particular place. And you're very cognizant, that what is appropriate in one place is not necessarily appropriate in another, or indeed another still. So,
yeah. And I think it speaks to the film's kind of intentions that Billy keeps the secret.
Yes.
Billy kind of plays ball and doesn't cause a stink.
She shares the burden.
She shares the burden. She discusses it with her family and everything, and they have these sort of light debates over it. But she doesn't kind of actually rock the boat. And you can imagine a more sort of heavy version of this film being one in which she does, and then there's fallout.
Yes.
And that's not what the film is about.
Yes. A more American film would have made that choice an individual choice, right? It's about how Billy feels and what she thinks is right and wrong. Here she gives way to the family. Whatever her own feelings, it's her family's decision, and she's a part of that family, and she goes along with that collective decision.
Yeah, which I think is lovely, and I think that's part of what makes the film, as I said at the start, such an easy film to watch, because it brings these things up and it doesn't batter you over the head with them, and it doesn't make these characters sort of behave aggressively or anything like that. It lets these questions linger, but that's it. I do want to mention, I think we mentioned just in passing, but we must mention Zhao Shuzhen, who plays Nai, the grandmother.
Ah, yes.
Who I've never seen before. I don't know what else she's been in, but she steals every scene she's in. Yes. She's this wonderful focus.
Yes.
She's bubbly and light and very grandmother real.
Yeah, she exudes both a kind of wisdom and a kind of ease and humor and wit, all kind of quite gently, but at all times kind of making her wishes known. Everyone could say that. So she's a very endearing figure.
And she and Awkwafina, as her granddaughter, have fantastic chemistry. And as you say, those scenes where it's just the two of them talking about it, it's very often it's kind of grandmother giving Billy advice or kind of expressing her wishes for her, that sort of thing. But the chemistry between them is fantastic, and you get this really beautifully conveyed sense of how much Billy misses her and loves her. She hasn't seen her in a long time, and she's so happy to kind of be back with her, despite the fact there is this lingering, pressing burden that is on Billy.
Yes,
throughout those scenes.
So you get the sense that part of that closeness is because they are in telephone contact all the time, right? Like the opening scene lets you know that, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's a phone call between the two of them.
Yeah.
So I really loved it, and I really liked the final couple of shots. I kind of thought I wouldn't as soon as they happened, but
Yes.
The end is Billy returns to New York, having said goodbye, and just walking down the street in New York, she just sort of screams, and then you see a tree outside the grandmother's flat in China, and all the birds. It kind of the scream echoes there, and all the birds leave it as though they've heard. And I kind of thought, it's a bit artsy initially, but then I thought, what, actually, this connection it speaks to.
Yes,
I love
it's very expressive.
Yeah.
So we highly recommend it. It's a really beautiful film. Do go see it if you get a chance. It's The Farewell, and we are eavesdropping at the movies.
Yes.
And we are on. I should know this by now.
We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. If you want to get in touch on social media, that's Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Cheerio.